Hi, this is Coda, and you're listening to XVGM Radio.
Welcome to XVGM Radio, where the bits keep coming. I'm Mike.
And I'm Justin.
And you're listening to Episode 5, Coda. We are very excited to be fortunate enough to speak to a really fantastic composer, and his name is Coda. That's his artist name. His actual real name is Ken Snyder. So we wanted to bring him on because I've actually been a fan for quite some time of your chiptunes and your work with game soundtracks and everything, and so I was really excited that we were able to access you for a couple hours and just chit chat with you a little bit about your work. So Ken, thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Yep, no problem. Happy to be here, guys.
First off, I wanted to thank Scarlet Moon Productions for allowing us the opportunity to interview you and kind of showcase the excellent track that we brought in, which was Omega Strike, which is a game that came out on 2017 on Steam, and then 2018 it recently came out on PlayStation 4, and I guess it's coming soon to Xbox One.
Yeah,
the track was Omega Strike title track. And what a doozy. What did you think of this one, Justin?
This was a lot of fun. I felt like there was a lot of different sort of moments or transitions in the song. Like if I close my eyes and listen to it, I feel like it's sort of taking me almost like a glimpse through the stages, or like sort of like what to expect. It was kind of a journey, actually. I really like this piece.
First off, I love those synth hits.
Yes.
That are kind of spread out throughout the track, and this definitely captures the Metal Slug vibe, and I'm pretty sure that's what you were going for. Is that right?
Yeah, it's a weird mix of Metal Slug and Metroid and Metal Gear Solid. The pacing of the game has a wide variation between stealth segments and a lot of action, and you were saying about the taking you through a journey. That was kind of my goal. I incorporated a lot of themes from the other tracks into that title theme. And that's the reason I usually write the title track towards the end of the soundtrack writing sessions.
Oh, okay.
That makes sense.
And that way I can.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Any ideas that come up, throughout the other tracks, I can sort of roll those into a medley, and I do that in some other tracks too, especially like the finale and some of the climactic tracks. I like to reincorporate the themes from other tracks.
Right. For the experience throughout the game that you kind of bring in, kind of introduce you in the beginning. Yeah, that's really cool.
That makes a lot of sense, and I think it worked really, really well for this. I have to say, I like this track a lot.
Definitely. So we're going to ask you a series of various different questions throughout the entire episode. So I may as well start off. How did you start your composing career? And also, where did you get the name Coda from? We were talking before we started. We were assuming that Coda is a reference to the music. There's like some sort of
musical annotation.
Right.
It takes you from a piece to like the actual ending in a piece that usually loops.
Right. Is that where you got it from, or?
Yeah, I'm sorry to say, indirectly, it's referring to the musical Coda, but I came up with this name when I was like 12 or something, and I really, really liked Led Zeppelin back then. And they have an album called Coda, which it wasn't even one of their main releases, but I just thought it was a cool short name. And not thinking too much about, how many other people would also have chosen that name.
Right. So how did you start off with composing regarding your career?
So, around that time I was also getting into writing video game music for my own hobby projects, and I also got into the OC remix and video game remix communities. And basically from there I got into some remix albums, contributed to some remixes on official soundtracks, and VideoBall was really my first full commercial release soundtrack. But from there, I've been slowly doing some more soundtracks. I've got a couple more in the mix right now that should come out later this year or next year.
Very cool.
Nice.
I believe 2011 was the first game that you composed for, is that right? Or as far as like officially released actual video game?
Which soundtrack is that?
I think that was Stardash.
Oh, yeah, I think even before that, Stardash was a licensed track, something that I had already written sitting around. But I think even before that was Milk Snake, which is a game that my friend made for first OS X, and we recently actually ported it to iOS. It's a fun little 3D snake or Nibbles style game.
Okay.
That was one of my first small soundtracks.
That's pretty cool. Were you kind of like a band geek like me and Justin, or were you more, you started, because you mentioned that you started with working, basically becoming a fan of OC Remix and then started working on your own tracks. So what was like your background as far as like, learning instruments and
musicality and stuff?
Musicality.
Yeah, I did get into musical instruments when I was young. I never had any real lessons aside from some guitar lessons, although I don't really consider myself a guitarist now. I'm really a point and click person.
Okay. And that's kind of how the chiptune community is, a lot of it.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't have to necessarily be a musician to be a really top-notch composer. So
right, especially with the different pieces of software that are out there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is it safe to say that you don't you don't write music traditionally like on a grand staff? Like you don't compose music with notes and stuff. You do it in the software.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, even as far as software goes, I'm pretty non-traditional. I write all my music in a program called OpenMPT, which is like a spreadsheet that makes music and is also like way uglier than a regular spreadsheet. And people look at this program and they just they can't believe that any decent sound could come out of that.
That's funny.
But yeah, it's not even a traditional software package like Ableton or Live. The notes go in a different direction, and it's just a really strange workflow that originated in like the days of DOS and Amiga home computers. but it's a workflow that I've settled into like maybe 10, 12 years ago, and I'm set in my ways, and it's a lot more enjoyable for me to work that way.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, hey, gotta work with what you know, right?
Yeah. I mean, do what you know, do it the way you know, and I mean, if the end result is as awesome as your stuff has been, then why change it?
Why change it? Yeah, that's very true.
That's really cool.
Speaking of that, we're going to get into our next track, which is actually from a game called Grave Danger, and we'll talk more about Omega Strike throughout the podcast, but Grave Danger is our next game. It came out on Steam and PlayStation 4 and Switch as of 2018, and this track is Last Stop Stage 1-A by Coda.
Welcome back. That was Last Stop Stage 1-A from Grave Danger. That came out on Steam, the PS4, and the Switch in 2018.
I love this track. It's so bouncy and happy, and it's got such a great groove. I love the little, like, the record scratches and the little, like, vocal effects, like the... Like, it's just really fun.
As everyone saw, I was grooving so much to this that I was surprised when you stopped it for the loop. I was like, wait, where'd it go? No, I particularly enjoy the deeper parts of it, like the bass drum in particular, and the lower notes, like right off in the beginning, dun 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 dun.
I'm gonna call that a bass piano.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's got a piano in there.
The piano. Yeah. It's so like, I don't know. There's something about it that's just like I feel it in my core, and I really like a good like bass groove.
Mm-hmm. I'm pretty sure that he just strapped like a piano to a bass guitar and somehow manipulated it to bang out keys, but they're really bass notes.
You guys know Lost Vikings, right?
Yes.
Oh yes.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, that was sort of the inspiration for Grave Danger, like a modernized version. You know, of course, Lost Vikings was like a product of its time, them trying to make like the coolest music they could make to contrast with the like these old Vikings in a alien spaceship or whatever.
Yeah.
So, you know, this game is sort of a similar concept. But, you know, this also incorporates the sort of, like, train track type music. I mean, that's probably why I was thinking of, like, the low piano and stuff.
Okay. I could see that.
Yeah. Then the song just kind of, it eventually sort of goes wherever it wants to. So it definitely left the New Jack Swing territory somewhere in the middle.
I noticed that in the background there's kind of like a lulling kind of weird like synth that's like wow. It sounds like someone's like going wow. Like that in and of itself is, I didn't pick it up the first time I listened to this track when we were originally picking tracks for this episode, and then when I kind of stopped and listened to it again, I was like, whoa, like that you kind of like buried a lot of stuff throughout this track. So repetitive listens, especially when you're playing a game like this, is really helpful because it helps with like kind of like digesting the track and then understanding it.
You kind of get something new each time you hear it.
Yeah.
Like, I'll say like when it comes to most video game music, I really enjoy like mixes of things, especially when you get to some of the more modern stuff and they mix some like chiptune style stuff with some like almost like live instrument style stuff, and I like some of the contrast here where you've got some like it all sounds chiptuney in the right way, but there's a few of the like higher pitched, like I can never pin the instrument, so I just call them like beeps and boops because that's what they sound like, and they really complement what's going on around them. Like they're really sound sort of subtle, and they're almost in the background, but like I hear them, I'm just like I really appreciate those sounds.
Yeah, I like to, you know, put those details in there and combine and contrast different styles for exactly the reasons you just said.
Yeah. So Grave Danger, as you were mentioning, it's a 2D action platformer. You can play as one of three characters: Dante, who's a cowboy; Malice, who's a reaper; and Elliot, who is the wizard. As you said, it's very similar to Lost Vikings. You have to switch between the different characters to solve like puzzles and advance throughout the game. It's got very colorful, cartoony graphics and style. And, you know, I kind of thought it was a little bit Mega Man X, especially when you're playing with Dante, because like you can like slide, like dash forward kind of. So it kind of gave me echoes of Mega Man X a little bit.
Yeah, it's definitely got some more action elements than Lost Vikings.
Now, as far as when you are starting composing, you had mentioned earlier that you'll generally record like a title screen track as one of the last tracks. So, but what do you usually start with when you do start out composing for a soundtrack?
I guess I have to say that I almost always start out with level 1 based on experience.
Yeah.
The overall process is typically I get a big list of tracks for a work in progress game that may have some screenshots and videos, usually of the first area, you know, plus maybe some references. That's pretty much all I have to go off of in terms of getting a feel for what sort of style would fit the style of the game, what the creator of the game is thinking of. in their head. You know, it really comes down to just sort of absorbing that information and letting that stew and think about it a little bit. And sometimes it takes a few different attempts on my part to nail down what I think is the right sound and what the creator of the game thinks is the right sound for the game.
So you kind of like give them the track when you think that you've reached a point where you're happy with it, and then you'll kind of go back and forth with them, like, oh, change this, or that's not right, or alter this, or things like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think to take Grave Danger as an example, I originally had more of a sort of metal sound, taking into account like the skeletons and all the spooky stuff, but that eventually that metalish track that I started with eventually evolved into the boss theme for Grave Danger. So it wasn't a total loss, but it did clue me in after I listened to it and compared it with the game that it just wasn't the right match, and it wasn't, most of all, it wasn't interesting to just have like a banging metal track with this sometimes slow paced puzzle platformer.
Right.
Yeah.
Very cool.
That makes a lot of sense. The process itself is always interesting to hear. Not that I know very many composers, but I know one person who's done a little bit of composing, and that's very similar to the experience that I've heard from her, where it's like you kind of get an idea of like, here's what we're looking for as far as feel goes,
right?
And you put together what you think fits, and then you go back and forth until you're both happy with the outcome.
Right.
But it's an exciting process.
Yeah. All right, so we'll move back into Omega Strike for our next track, and this is Resistance Caverns. Let's give it a listen.
Hey, thanks for listening. That was Resistance Caverns off of Omega Strike, which came out in 2017 on Steam, this year 2018 on PS4, and soon on the Xbox One.
What did you think of that one?
That one was really cool. Much like the opening track from the same game, obviously. Mm-hmm. It was a lot of fun. But the opening was kind of almost... it's called Resistance Caverns, so obviously I'm going to say I get like a cave feeling from it.
Yeah, a little more dangerous vibe.
Yeah, like almost like an underground theme type thing. But yep. I don't know. It feels like it gets dangerous as it goes deeper into it. The opening kind of feels like I don't know, like I don't want to say being in a cave because it just sounds really stupid because it's obvious. But like it feels relaxing isn't quite the word, but almost like it starts off a little bit serene and then it gets like as you get in, you're like, oh, these caves. Mm-hmm. There's something here.
So yeah, I took it as more of like a dangerous kind of vibe initially because you've got those very like dark piano kind of sounds as laid out almost like a bass line again. But then when the track really, to me personally, comes really to life is when that guitar line comes in.
Yep.
And you got that like a little bit more like hopeful kind of vengeance vibe kind of going through, and again, very militant, very similar to the initial track that we played for the intro title.
Yeah, the orchestral stings too.
Yes,
really like take it into the danger zone, as it were.
Yeah, there were a whole lot of themes that I wanted to roll into this track, which was, of course, the first track because it's the first level of the game. Mm-hmm. So this is where I was trying to nail down all of the sounds of the rest of the game. Mm-hmm. And there's so much going on at this part of the game. It's like an infiltration mission. There's stealth at the beginning, but eventually as you explore, you're getting into bigger battles, and you have the whole like revenge sort of storyline
that really fits with the music. That really comes true to form.
Yeah,
as far as the sound goes.
There's like the metal slug elements, and then there's sort of like almost like James Bond kind of music with the high strings and the vibraphone.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So Omega Strike, just bring everybody up to pace as far as what kind of game this is. Omega Strike is an action-adventure game. It has multiple different playable characters. I believe there's about 3 characters that you can play as, very similar to Grave Danger, but there's like an interconnected world that you can explore. You can defeat all these different enemies, like big bad bosses, and soldiers and all sorts of things like that. You search for treasure, and you can also learn new abilities.
Like upgrade your hero and stuff.
Yeah, upgrade your hero, so to speak. It's kind of like they call it a Metroidvania in the sense that
you call it an Egavania.
Egavania, right? It's a non-linear exploration adventure kind of style action adventure game.
Nice.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I will say that of all the games that I really want to pick up probably throughout this podcast, not to say that the other games aren't great, because they are, but the ones that have me most excited to play is definitely Omega Strike and Grave Danger.
I agree. I was going to say, I feel like this episode is going to cost me a lot of money.
Yes.
I'm going to buy Grave Danger. I need something new for my Switch, and this looks like a lot of fun.
Yes.
Omega Strike, obviously, like I said, I haven't played it, but I've seen some of the seen some of the gameplay videos, the press kit, and listening to the music, and I mean, this is going to end up being a must-have for me. Yeah. I'm going to spend so much money.
Yeah, it's a really solid game.
Yeah. And a lot of these other games that we're going to talk about too are like they look like a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And just where to even go.
These developers know their stuff, and they know that in order for them to make a game that is not only fun to play but also sounds great, they got to go to somebody like Ken here.
Yeah. No, agreed. And that's the thing. Like obviously we listen to all the songs that we picked before we play them, and this music is like what I like to hear in modern video games.
Sure, absolutely, yeah. It's a nice blend of chiptunes kind of mixed with that retro style, but also still kind of has like a modern vibe to it as well.
Yes.
Now, when you're composing these soundtracks, what would you say are the biggest challenges that you have to overcome, along with like some of the risks that you're willing to take in composing?
Yeah, so I would say that typically the biggest challenge is making sure that what I write fits the pacing and the action of the game, because I think that's one of the most unique things about video game music is, as a composer, you don't have control to synchronize what you're writing exactly with what's going on. And of course, some games have dynamic music. As the action increases, the music will change. But when you add that into the mix, it really affects what you compose a whole lot, because the more sections and different like verses and choruses and bridges that your songs have, that complicates all of the transitions between the sections. And typically a game with dynamic music has like a couple different versions of the same track from start to end, and it's either a short loop or just instruments being taken in and out. But the way I like to write, there's usually lots of different sections and melodic bits and chord changes, and so dynamic music is pretty hard to do in an interesting way with that. And plus there's the technical side of it too. The developer has to implement all of those changes and triggers. So the challenge becomes, how do I write something that's interesting to me and interesting to listen to on its own and within the game? And sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes I have to see it in action to tell whether it works or not. But that's probably the biggest challenge.
Okay. Very cool.
When just out of curiosity, when you say see it in action, earlier you had mentioned about like seeing some of the gameplay footage. When you are composing, do you get to so is it mostly like they send you like footage of the level in the game, or do you get to play a level without any music, or how do you actually get that feel?
Yeah, so with Omega Strike, the developer was actually kind enough to send me builds of the game as he was developing it.
Oh.
So I did get to play some of the levels before writing the music.
It must be so surreal to write a piece of music and then it ends up in a game.
Yeah.
And you get to play the end result afterwards and just kind of take it all in and be like, oh, wow.
It's really cool.
Yeah. So let's move into our next track. This is VideoBall. This is a totally new game that we're talking about for this episode. This is on the PlayStation 4 as well as Steam, and it came out in 2016. This is Jam, and it is a jam.
Oh boy. Hey, welcome back. That was Jam from 2016's VideoBall that came out on PS4 and Steam, and that was super groovy.
Yes. Oh, love the funk jams.
Yes, it was so funky. So the bass groove, the rest of it was really good, but I kept getting lost in that bass groove.
Oh, yes.
I feel like it was a mixture of just good funky bass, and then every so often you'd hear what sounds like a slap bass going on, and it was just so buttery.
Yes.
That seems to be a common theme, right? Like, I feel like if your song's bass isn't interesting, like, what's the point? You know?
No, I agree.
Completely agree.
Yep,
Yes.
totally agree. Yeah, this is just funk city, man. I was digging this, definitely. And I really like the, I'd say like early 80s, late 70s kind of vibe that it kind of presented, almost like post-disco.
You talking about like in the main melody?
Yeah, that main melody. Dun, 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 dun. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I was really feeling that. So it's funny because if I remember correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you had mentioned that you were on OC Remix, and one of my favorite composers is Jake Kaufman, also known as Vert. Yep. And this definitely, like, it sounds a lot like Vert. And if I recall correctly, didn't you play a show with Vert? I don't know if it was MagFest or what.
Yeah, it was a MagFest. And
it was? Yeah. Okay.
That's,
yeah, because I remember seeing...
Who know my work well probably know that I'm a huge fan of Jake Kaufman, and that he's also my buddy. So, yeah, I take a lot of inspiration from him. The working title of this song was actually Streets. Like, I was sort of inspired by Streets of Rage, although the end product, I think, isn't very Streets of Ragey, but that's where my head is at.
It's less house and dancey, and it's more like funk. That funk, obscure, like 70s, 80s vibe to it that Jake definitely uses in his music as well. I knew that you played MagFest because I remember he was on stage and then he brought you out and then you were jamming on and I was like, whoa! I was like, who is this guy? And that was kind of my personal introduction to your music. That, as well as, and you're probably gonna laugh, but you did a 8-bit like rendition of Chocolate Rain.
Yep.
Yeah. And I remember listening to that and being like, this is awesome, this is so great, because that was like right around the time when Chocolate Rain, the song, was on YouTube and it was big, it was a huge hit. Yep. And when I heard this version, I was like, oh, this version's even better. Like, so
I think you posted it on Facebook, and I think I'm fairly sure I've heard it too, because now that you're talking about an 8-bit version of Chocolate Rain, I'm hearing it in my head.
So it's pretty funny.
That is crazy.
Yeah, I think that might be my most listened to song of all time still.
Really? Yeah. That's funny. So, but anyways, let's talk about VideoBall. So VideoBall was developed, I believe, by Tim Rogers. He was a video game developer. He originally wanted to make a one-button version of StarCraft. And this game is like a sports action game, and you control up to 6 human players, or you can play with other computer-controlled AI. And the point of this game is to maneuver and operate moving triangles that shoot projectiles that move a ball around a court, and the whole point is to get the ball in the other team's goal to gain points and to win the game. There's a challenge mode, there's online multiplayer, so like it's a pretty cool, fun title.
Yeah.
It's a shame it didn't get as much recognition as it should have. Yes, it was a simplistic in terms of design and the core creation of it, but
it's that simplicity that actually makes it kind of interesting.
Absolutely.
I was looking at it on Steam a little while ago, actually, and it's gotten good reviews and good ratings, and the videos, like, simplicity isn't always a bad thing. Basically, like it's a fairly simple to understand game, but it's another game that looks like a lot of fun.
Yeah.
That I may have to look into, especially because it's right there on Steam.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, being on PS4, it opens up a great opportunity to do like multiplayer with friends and stuff. So pretty cool.
I have to say, back in 2013, when I first played this game, I have to say Tim Rogers is a genius. And after I played this game, it was like a very early demo. I think the game changed completely several times since I first played it. I pretty much begged Tim to let me write the music for it. That's how much fun it was at that point. So I would say, if you have at least one friend, you need to get VideoBall. It's awesome. It's much better in person co-op than online with the lag. It's definitely a really, really good party game.
Yeah, I'll have to pick it up.
Yeah, it does look like
As Justin said earlier, this episode's going to cost us all a fortune. Yeah, I'll probably grab it on like PS4.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Yeah, we all have PS4. Now, when it comes to the game, I remember reading on Twitter while doing research for this episode, Tim had posted something online saying that the game unfortunately didn't do well and actually cost him quite a bit of money.
Oh man!
Unfortunately, so yeah, if you're listening to this and you dug that jam, support this jam. Get the game, because it's pretty cool stuff. So, which composers would you say inspire you the most? And also, if you could co-compose with any composer on any soundtrack, if you haven't already, who would you pick?
Yeah, so we already covered Jake Kaufman, aka Vert. He's definitely a big inspiration. Another up-and-coming guy who I really like is called Stinkbug, and he doesn't have any commercial releases under his belt yet.
Okay.
He's done a soundtrack for a Cartoon Network Teen Titans Flash game. And it's really, really good. And I'm friends with him on IRC and Discord, and we talk occasionally. But he's really good, and I would love to do a soundtrack with him. I think we have similar compatible styles in the chiptune realm. But yeah, look him up. He's Stinkbug on SoundCloud.
Cool. Yeah, we'll have to check him out. Yeah. I know that you also worked with Jake on I think it was the Mighty Switch Force. Was it 2 or the original soundtrack? You did some arrangements.
I actually did a remix for both games.
Oh, okay, cool.
Nice.
Yeah.
So let's move into our next game, and this is Stardash. This is a 2011 release on iOS and Android. It was remastered recently in 2018, and this track is called Tricky. Let's give it a listen.
Listeners, that was Tricky from the game Stardash, which came out in 2011 on iOS and Android and was recently remastered this year in 2018 for the same consoles, phones, systems, platforms.
Platforms, there you go.
That was a lot of fun. That felt very much like I want to say Game Boy because that's the feel that I get from it.
Yeah.
The sound almost feels like it's halfway between like an NES and a Game Boy.
Yeah.
Kind of a sound chip.
It's
thing.
funny. It's funny you should say that. The goal was to make a Game Boy soundtrack, just based on the look of the game. But I actually wrote all of the songs in FamiTracker, so they're technically NES songs, just written in a Game Boy style.
Okay, I was wondering about that because I know you had mentioned
OpenMPT, and this is one of the few soundtracks where I didn't use it.
Right. Okay, that's what I figured because I was like listening to this. I'm like, it's got to be something different, so that makes sense.
It sounded like an NES song, but it felt like a Game Boy song. I guess I'm just on the ball today. That's really cool. I'd say that you nailed the feel of the Game Boy. The Game Boy sounds really well. Like I like the way the snare sounds. It has a very distinct kind of sound on those kind of systems.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's really cool.
It's just a bouncy, fun, happy number, and I could almost picture this like a Kirby game a little bit. Maybe like during Kirby. Like a story bit.
Like where it's Kirby's running around.
Yeah, like Kirby.
You're waiting to play.
Yeah. Like Kirby gets like knocked in the head with something, or runs away, acting all silly. Something like that is kind of like a story mode where like you could see like text scrolling across. I just like picture in my head like text sound that you would get from like retro games, where it'd be like You know.
Oh, yeah.
Stardash is a game that's kind of like a mix between like Super Meat Boy's arcade like franticness, kind of combined with Mario Land's level design and style. For at least the first Mario Land game, like what looking at footage of this game, it definitely kind of rings true to that because you're jumping around from platform to platform. You're kind of avoiding all the different obstacles and traps, and of course collecting coins. So it's kind of like that weird mix between like Meat Boy and Mario Land.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Jumping on enemies, stuff like that.
Yeah. So you had mentioned that you use Famitracker. Have you used Famitracker on anything else?
Other than like a couple one-off songs, I haven't used it on any other soundtracks.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's not really in my comfort zone.
Yeah.
It's something that I use out of necessity.
Right. Or if like a developer is looking for a specific sounds, so to speak. Yeah.
That's wow. I mean, for something that's not in your comfort zone, I'd say you did really well with
you
with
nailed
Stardash. I liked a lot of the songs that were on that soundtrack when I listened to them.
So it definitely sounds like you're a pretty big fan of video games. So if you could compose for one video game series, which would it be and why?
So I thought about this a little bit. I guess it's not really a series, but I would definitely love to write a dating sim or a visual novel soundtrack.
Okay.
That's like, I think that's the sweet spot of like, you get a variety of tracks for different areas and character themes, and you can tend a lot more towards melodic and like J-pop kind of stuff. And I know you're not going to play any Tree of Knowledge on this segment, but that was really the impetus behind Tree of Knowledge, was to write a fake dating sim soundtrack, but I have yet to write a real dating sim soundtrack. I think I'd be good at it, considering that I've already written a fake one.
That's cool.
Yeah, that's really awesome. I did not realize that, but that makes a lot of sense because I mean, dating sims and visual novels. I don't have a lot of experience in them. I've seen a whole bunch of them, and I mean, Phoenix Wright is sort. It's not really, but there are parts of Phoenix Wright that are almost like
visual novels.
Yeah,
right.
And I mean, for a composer, I imagine that's kind of like a Playscape or a Wonderland, because you just you get all these different scenes, like you're saying, like character themes, and location themes. So that's really cool. I dig it. I get it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. All right, so let's move into my last pick, and then we'll move into Justin's picks. This is Alter Ego Dreamwalker. This is the 2013 release that came out on Windows, Linux, mobile, and Android, and this is Strollback, also known as World 2, again by Coda.
Thank you for listening to XVGM Radio. That song we just heard was Strollback, World 2. That was from Alter Ego Dreamwalker, which came out in 2013 for Windows, Linux, mobile, and Android.
What a chill track, especially after talking about other tracks that were kind of like 70s, 80s inspired. This kind of has that like hop skip kind of vibe that a lot of like 80s stuff had in like the early 80s.
Yep.
You know, you get a lot more like relaxed stuff that was more like easy listening, but this kind of was a lot more vibrant than that kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, I found this one to be a lot more, how do you say?
Like trip hop.
Yeah, a little bit almost trip hoppy. It was, I mean, considering the game and how it is, which we'll talk about in just a sec. It feels like it fits very well with sort of just like the puzzly platformer type of gameplay. Like the music doesn't like get too frantic or make you like, you know, you're not like stressing out over trying to avoid or kill enemies. You're just sort of trying to solve a puzzle.
Right.
And the music definitely aids that process by making it not super like crazy or anything.
Right. Now, Alter Ego Dreamwalkers, I guess, I'm not sure if it's a remake or a sequel to the original Alter Ego, which the developer created for, I guess, Windows, PC, as well as NES and ZX Spectrum. So, do you know if you do the soundtrack on the original Alter Ego, or were you kind of brought in like for Alter Ego Dreamwalker only?
Yeah, so Alter Ego Dreamwalker is, I think, a sequel.
Okay.
And the composer of the original Alter Ego is another friend of mine called Coolor, and I was sort of trying to imitate his style on this soundtrack. So, so even if you listen to the two soundtracks together, they would sort of be cohesive. This track, Strollback, in particular, is my riff on his World 1 song from that soundtrack. And if you go to my Bandcamp on the Dreamwalker soundtrack, there's a link to the original game soundtrack as well, so you can compare and contrast those. And I even got Coolor to remix my remix of his tracks for a bonus track on the Dreamwalker soundtrack, so that was fun.
How meta.
Yeah, that's actually really cool though.
Yeah.
I'm trying to imitate your style for this game, and then you're gonna take what I'm doing that's almost you anyway and do that. That's super meta.
That's awesome. So Alter Ego Dreamwalker features a hero that has a shadow version of himself that's kind of mirroring everything that the main character that you play as. And so it's sort of like a puzzle platformer where you can switch back and forth between your alter ego and the main player for only a certain number of times, like per level. And it's basically a race to try to get to the end of each level and try to figure out where to go, how to reach the stage. It's not quite as crazy as like Fez is.
Oh yeah.
In that sense, but it's more, everything's on like a flat, like regular 2D level. So there's no like, it's not like Fez where it's like there's a giant cube and you gotta like twist the cube, and it's not like anything like that. So, but it's very visually kind of dreamy as well. So it very much fits the style, like the graphics fit the style of the music very well. They complement each other pretty good.
Yeah.
All right, so what video games inspired you to make chiptune music?
So I would say maybe not video games in particular.
Okay.
And this is kind of embarrassing. I think the first chiptune I heard that made me want to write chiptunes was probably like in 2005 or something on 4chan, back when no one had even heard of it. They had a Space Jam chiptune mashup like embedded on the page playing in the background, and I was like so mesmerized because it was just like nothing I'd ever heard before, and it was like Space Jam was just like barely even a meme at that time,
right?
And so it was just like out of this world to me to hear like a weird kind of remix of Space Jam that was like really cool and had like a bunch of sounds that you just like didn't hear, like that sort of reminded me of like stuff that I heard when I was a kid from video games, but and so that was like the first time that I was even exposed to the term chiptune. Which made me a latecomer because there was already like a chiptune scene of like Blip Festival and stuff going on in New York before that time.
Right.
And so and so I dug into it some more, and I found, the whole Blip Festival and the 8-Bit People's label, in Chibi Tech in particular. Hearing her like Famicompo entries where she made the NES sound like it's talking. That just blew my mind. But that got me on the track to learning how do they do it, and downloading. I think first it was actually Nerd Tracker 2, which is like a DOS program. That was before Famitracker even existed. Then I branched out into OpenMPT from there, and that's basically how I got where I am now.
Okay.
So less video game, more like demo scene almost.
Right.
Nice.
Yeah. Now, as far as video games, as far as the soundtracks go, are there any specific like video game soundtracks that you kind of bring to, with kind of like bring along with you when you compose, that you kind of keep in mind? Like, is there like a Contra or a Mega Man or anything from your childhood that you were kind of like, oh yeah, this is one of my favorites, and I want to like kind of reinvigorate that style.
I was one of those kids that grew up with PC games. So my nostalgia is based around like games like Jazz Jackrabbit, Jill of the Jungle, stuff that probably most people have never heard of.
I've heard of Jazz Jackrabbit and Jill of the Jungle, but I haven't really looked into their soundtracks. I'll have to go back and listen.
They have super good like 90s New Jack Swing kind of soundtracks.
Awesome.
I wouldn't call them chiptunes, but they've definitely got the like retro feel that I try to go for like constantly.
You said the magic word. You said New Jack Swing, so I'm in.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. So I didn't really grow up with any video games that had the typical chiptune square wave bleeps and bloops. I had a Game Boy at some point, so I did play Pokemon and some Sonic games on the Game Gear.
Right.
But I don't feel like those are like part of my sound. I sort of like revisited those as like a teenager and a young adult, trying to expose myself to all the video games that I missed. So of course now I'll incorporate stuff from Sonic and Final Fantasy and any other game that has some nice music in it. But the childhood element is like the foundation is these strange PC games that mostly came out of like Europe that probably most people haven't played.
That's cool. Yeah. That's really cool.
That
still a big part of video games.
Yeah.
So, yeah, may as well bring that along. Cool.
PC gaming is still gaming.
Yes, absolutely. So let's go ahead and listen to Justin's picks for what you got. So what do you got for us?
All right, so first up, we're going to listen to another Stardash tune. This is the track called Temple, and again, Stardash came out in 2011 on iOS and Android.
Cool.
XVGM Radio.
Welcome back to XVGM Radio. That was Stardash, and the track was Temple, and that was released in 2011, as we said before, by Coda. I was feeling that. That was definitely like, if you told me that you wrote this for Shantae, I'd be like, yo, I'm in.
Yeah,
like that.
It was definitely a Shantae inspired track.
Okay, perfect.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, that's one of the first things I noticed when I first listened to it, and that's why I picked it. Like, I feel bad because I feel like Mike is the bigger Shantae fan here than I
Yes.
am, but he introduced me to Shantae, and when I first heard this, I was like, oh, this is totally a Shantae track.
Yeah.
This is awesome.
Actually, it's
You're
really
wearing a
funny.
Shantae shirt?
I'm literally wearing a Shantae shirt right now. I didn't even realize. Like, that's funny. Yeah. No, this is
so nice, so bouncy. Again, if I close my eyes and listen to the song, I can totally just see like Shantae in her idle animation just bouncing along to this track. It's so fun and like it's bouncy, and like I like again we're going back to sort of this this NES GB sort of sound, and it's crunchy and crispy and everything I like in my cereal.
yes, the Chiptune cereal, delicious. I was really liking the drums.
Yeah.
As you said, very like crunchy kind of sounding, but also they don't like stand out too much in the sense that they don't like they don't cause the track to kind of sound like off kilter. Like
Right.
Everything kind of sounds like the bass and the rhythm section really fits together well with the melody, but the melody is just definitely the star of the show. Yeah,
Absolutely.
Yeah, I almost feel kind of like it's a cop out to use that Egyptian scale, that's stereotypical, like but everyone does it. Like if you listen, like even like trap and bass music nowadays, it's like that's the scale that you got to use because like that's the only thing that sounds dark enough to fit. So, well, when in Rome.
That's true. Don't knock it if you haven't heard it before.
Yeah, that if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Exactly.
Etc. But now your other dark options are really just using the minor scale. But I mean, that's like you really only want to use that for things that are like bad things or like the enemy theme or boss themes and stuff. But I think that the Egyptian scale worked really well there. And like I said, it very much harkens to Shantae, but there's absolutely nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
I think that it fits, considering that the name of the track is Temple, so it's a temple theme.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's just, I mean, don't reinvent the wheel if you don't have to, man.
True. And then I was going to mention also kind of harkening back to Mario Land. That track from Mario Land, this kind of also eerily sounds very similar to it as well. So it's kind of also using that Egyptian scale to full effect.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's like the otherworldly. I mean, for those of us in the West,
Yeah.
it's almost like, oh, it's another land.
Yeah.
Which makes sense when you're a white guy.
Yeah.
But so jumping into some of my questions, I'm going to start off with a goofy one. Dr. Pepper or Mr. Pibb?
Pib.
Yeah.
Nice.
Okay.
Yeah, I always go for the Pib.
Okay.
Pibb Extra.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm more of a Dr. Pepper man myself.
Good to know.
Mr. Pibb just hasn't gotten his degree yet.
Yeah,
and
he's got a few more
really,
years to go.
If I'm going to drink a soda beverage, a beverage of soda, it's going to be from a doctor, from somebody who's a professional.
Qualified.
Yeah, a qualified professional.
Yeah, I guess I want to root for the underdog.
Yeah.
So,
I'm sort of the same way. Like if Mr. Pibb is available, I go for it because it's like, oh, I never see Mr. Pibb. It's like Mellow Yellow. I never see Mellow Yellow.
Yes.
like if they made like a Coke Junior, I would drink that. I don't even care what's in it.
I believe that is RC Cola, and I believe they just celebrated their 8th purchase.
Oh,
Yeah.
jeez. But on a slightly more serious note, what do you personally consider to be one of your most incisive moments thus far in your career? Obviously, you still have plenty of career ahead of you, but you've had some really awesome stuff thus far. Some of which we've listened to, some of which we're still going to listen to. But what do you consider to be your some of your incisive moments?
I mean, I guess I would hope that the big one hasn't happened yet.
That's fair.
I'm hoping that the turning point hasn't been reached yet. But I'd say so far, I think the biggest thing has been being part of VideoBall. Even though the game itself didn't sell that well, I just think the great reviews that it got, and the people who did play VideoBall, everyone loves the music. And that is, one of the main reasons why I do what I do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let people have a good time.
Yeah. And I mean, when you've got a game that people are going back to time and time again to play, it's so important for the music to be like really energetic, really fun, and make you want to go back and listen to it again. That's kind of, why we do what we do here at XVGM Radio.
So. Yeah. Trying to get some of those tracks out there that people may not have heard of.
Yep.
And I mean, even if they have heard of them, making sure that the good stuff is put out there. And that's actually one of the things that made VideoBall kind of hard for us to pick from, because there's a lot of tracks from that game, and a good number of them were just like in our top picks, and it's like, well, we're gonna pick a song each, and you gotta pick one.
Yeah. Speaking of VideoBall,
that's actually our next track is a track from VideoBall, and the track is called Rock. And again, VideoBall came out in 2016 on the PS4 and Steam.
All right,
take a listen.
Let's rock. All right, you're back, and that was rockin'. And there's a good reason for that. The name of the track was Rock, and that's VideoBall's soundtrack, again by Coda, our guest today. That was really grindy. I love that beginning. That yeah,
that's
chuggy.
That and the transition are really what brought me into this this particular track. I feel so. There's a lot of different types of music that I like, but a lot of what really gets me going is sort of like a lot of like the gothic music scene sounds, the really like deep, growly, grindy type of stuff. And this opens up like I can almost hear this as like kind of a Marilyn Manson type song.
Okay, yeah.
And then it just brightens right up with that main melody.
That main melody.
And it's not a stark contrast. Like it's not jarring. It makes sense, and it makes me go, oh, this is like, it started out as something that I really wanted to hear, and then it turned into something that was even more interesting than the opening had me ready for. And it was just like,
I think that if there were more drums or deeper, like thicker drums that were more industrial kind of sounding, I don't necessarily know if that melody would be able to because that would have been a much more stark contrast.
Yeah. That would have been the alternative. Instead of it brightening up, it would have gotten even deeper, and then you would have had somebody screaming lyrics over something, and it would have been just like completely different. But it was so surprising the first time I listened to it, and then on subsequent listens I was just like, I went back to this one and I'd have to go back and re-listen. There was this one and another one that I was really torn between, and then after subsequent listens of rock, I was like, no, this is too cool. I have to go with this one.
Yeah, you definitely went with a more like kind of industrial vibe when you picked your track for this particular game. And then I of course went with the more like Kaufman-esque track, if you will.
Yeah, it's funny. VideoBall was fun and interesting because Tim Rogers specifically asked for some reference tracks. Actually, I think none of his reference tracks or suggestions were from other video games, which is what I usually get. So in this case, he wanted a track like Gary Glitter's Rock and Roll. Now the typical stadium chant song. And it kind of turned into this sort of like more industrial kind of thing, because I wanted to push it in that sort of like weird direction and take some risks there. But yeah, it's really supposed to be Gary Glitter Rock and Roll song. And there were a couple other tracks from VideoBall too that are just like straight up like there's a Prince track, there's a Herbie Hancock track.
Nice.
And a couple other things. Some I came up with on my own. Like there's an ELO style track that's cool. He didn't ask for, but I decided that on my own it would fit.
That's awesome. That is really interesting to hear, and I'm gonna have to go back and re-listen to the soundtrack, knowing that. Cause, I mean, each one of the tracks I think is named after like a genre of music,
like rock, jam.
Yeah. I think there was one called jazz or jazzy or something like that. But knowing that there was like that, it wasn't just that like, this is the type of music that it is, but like each track is sort of inspired by a different either artist or something like that. Knowing that there's a Prince type track, I have to go back and try to figure out which one that is. That's awesome.
Definitely.
So yeah. Speaking of tracks and how much fun they are, this is kind of a two-part question. Is there a track that you've composed that you love the most? And I know that tracks are kind of like your children. You can't pick a favorite, but I'm asking you to. And then the second half is there a track that you wish you could improve or redo, or that you actually plan on improving or redoing?
Yeah, I'm sure if you asked me any 2 days the same question, you get two different answers. But I think right now I'm kind of feeling like from Alter Ego Dreamwalker soundtrack, there's a track called Sweet Home, and it's like a very laid back, relaxed track in contrast to most of the other stuff that I end up doing. But I kind of like the simplicity of it, and I think it's a super memorable tune. And my friend DJ Boosh did a remix of that, and it's the last track on there, and I really like their remix of it.
Nice.
Very cool.
That's cool. So as far as the second part, is there a track that you wish that you could, or that you actually have planned to or already did improve or redo?
Probably some of the songs in the middle of a Mega Strike. I think the mid part of the game is always difficult for me, as far as like, at the beginning of a game you have all this energy and you're introducing new themes, and at the end of the game it's like you can just go balls to the wall, anything goes, wailing guitars and stuff. And in the middle of the game, you have to decide whether to, dial it back, or how do you keep it interesting. And so, some of the pacing, I think, in the middle of a Mega Strike, and probably some of my other soundtracks, or I haven't really figured out how to keep it interesting for myself. And so those are sometimes I feel not the strongest tracks on the soundtrack. But I don't think there's anything that I feel like, oh, I'm just releasing this because I can't spend any more time on it, and I'm not happy with it.
Right. Yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense, because as you said, you're going crazy at the end. You're going with tons of energy in the beginning, and so you've kind of been left with this middle chunk of gameplay that you've got to try to figure out, what do you think the listener might want to listen to, what do you think that you want to hear out of the track. So I can imagine that's got to be difficult for a composer,
and what fits, and definitely keeping the energy up there, because obviously you want to keep the player engaged.
Yep, keep on keeping on. All right. Well, what do you got next for us?
Well, speaking of keeping engaged, the next track is off of Grave Danger, which, as we said, came out in 2018 on Steam, the PS4, and the Switch. And the track is called Dangerous Enemy. Ooh.
All right, you're back, and that was Grave Danger. That was the 2018 PlayStation 4 and Switch game, and it also came out on Steam. And that track was called Dangerous Enemy.
Yes, it was.
Yes,
and
definitely a
felt
boss vibe.
Yeah. So, tell me if I'm off base here, but I feel like I've been getting some of these right. This feels like you created your own Final Fantasy boss battle music and then turned it into a drum and bass phenomenon.
Yeah, I think that's about right. This was actually the first track that I wrote that before settling on the New Jack Swing style, and I believe this was used in the Kickstarter trailer. It was written at that point specifically for the trailer. So you can see that how it's a lot more intense than really any of the other tracks on the soundtrack. But it works for a boss fight, which is pretty much where all the action elements of the game are.
Yeah. And that makes sense, though, because, I mean, when you're fighting a boss, you want the music to always be, for the most part, like dark, sinister sounding, and that's definitely what I'm grabbing from this track in particular. And, going with the track that I picked, Last Stop Stage 1-A, I mean, that is a very dancey number. And so you can't really have or at least, in my opinion, having really super dancey tracks as boss themes, it kind of detaches away from the fact that it's a menacing experience. Yeah.
I mean, you definitely want to add to the experience of the game and give the player that feeling of this is an important fight, or this is a do or die situation.
Right.
And I mean, this track just kicked me in the pants.
Mm-hmm.
It was exactly that, and when I get to this point in the game, I just know that I'm going to be super excited to hear the song.
Are your pants okay?
I mean, they're still in one piece for now.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
So, speaking of fun games and fun music, what game did you have the most fun composing for?
I think I've got to say VideoBall. We touched on that a little bit earlier, but you know, it was a fun experience. Tim Rogers is a fun guy. I don't know if you've read any of his stuff on Kotaku, but he's really some people probably don't like that he writes like 2,000 word articles on Kotaku rambling about stuff, but and to me he's a really interesting guy. You know, he had lots of neat ideas, I think, for the soundtrack in addition to, of course, the actual game. And he's the one who came up with all of the titles after the fact. So yeah, none of those titles on the soundtrack are the original working title for the track. He had the idea of they should all be named some like short, impactful word like hot or slam, slick.
Yeah.
So that was one of the things that I really noticed about that soundtrack when I was looking at it is like all of the tracks were just one word, and I was like, this is like, you know, what are we getting into? And then I, like in almost every case, the word that was there, you know, felt like it fit with the music that we listened to, which was really cool. So
I always wondered about that, like as far as like who picks the names of certain tracks, because I mean, you know, there's also like a lot of games out there that have tracks that you know, get misinterpreted for what the name of the track is. Like the only one I can think of off the top of my head is like Sticker Bush Symphony, which you know, I've heard Sticker Brush Symphony, Sticker Bush Symphony.
Yes.
I've heard Bramble Blast, like just named off the level itself. So you know, when you go online and you start searching all these tracks, it's different than buying a CD and having the tracks right there. So I always wonder, like, who comes up with the names of the tracks? Is it like more of a composer thing, or is it more of like you know, they write the track and then they go, yeah, this one's called Jiggly Bits 5000 or something like that, and then you know, they come in and they're like, you can't call the name of the track that. This one's called Rock. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it's different in every circumstance. Like for Grave Danger, I got to name the tracks, and I had a bunch of fun naming them after like what I would imagine like a 90s R&B track to be named, like Bone to Bone with the 2 instead of the 2.
Yep.
But then for like Omega Strike, I didn't want to go through the process of saying like, hey, can I name this track this name? So all the tracks on Omega Strike are just named after the actual area. And then, of course, for VideoBall, Tim Rogers got to name everything. I guess it helps that VideoBall has a music selection, so the names of the tracks are actually officially ordained inside the game.
Right. Like you could pick from the tracks.
That makes a lot of sense, actually. Huh.
Cool. All right, let's move on to our second to last track. What do you got for us, Justin?
All right, so this time around we're going to listen to Clockout World 3 from the game Alter Ego Dreamwalker. And again, that game came out in 2013 on Windows, Linux, mobile, and Android, and composed by the awesome Coda.
right, you're back, and that was Clock Out World 3. And again, that was Alter Ego Dreamwalker. 2013 was the year of release in Windows, Linux, mobile, and Android. This was quite different from the other track, and I got some serious Contra vibes.
I could see that.
Yeah. I guess it's kind of obvious by now. I have a sort of prog metal streak going on, especially in some of my older stuff. And I really like to not ignore any of my influences. You know, I grew up listening to not only video game music, but like Led Zeppelin and stuff like that. And, you know, even some like industrial goth rock, like you mentioned. It was really the OC remix and video game remix community and people like Vert who got me into like Dream Theater and other progressive metal guys. So yeah, I've got not too many on soundtracks, but stuff like this is sort of my chiptune take on prog metal.
That's
cool.
That's fair. Yeah,
that's pretty accurate. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned Dream Theater. They're one of my favorite prog bands. But yeah, in this one in particular, it's been sort of a trend on a lot of the stuff that I like here. But the bass groove in this track was just super groovy, and I like it. We talked about the earlier Alter Ego Dreamwalker track that we played, how it was sort of laid back and makes sense with the type of gameplay you have. And this one feels a little bit more intense. I wouldn't really call it more frantic, but there's definitely a bit more intensity to this track, which I really like. But it's also not so much that it detracts from the type of gameplay that we're looking at.
Sure.
It still feels calm enough to be puzzle platforming, trying to figure this stuff out, and especially as it gets later into the track, it definitely mellows out a bit. But the beginning is very intense, and you mentioned the prog stuff, and that makes a lot more sense now. That's really cool
with that rolling bass.
Yes.
And that groove element kind of coming through. It's not until the main melody kind of comes in that I almost envisioned not necessarily prog but jazz fusion with that kind of sporadic kind of sound to it. And I'm a fan of prog as well. I like stuff like Rush and Kansas and like all that like 70s like classic sound. So to see that kind of brought out in a track like this is really cool to see, especially with that 8-bit melody that kind of comes through.
Definitely.
That really kind of struck me as like a fusion element to it. So it's good stuff.
So my next question we actually touched on a little bit earlier, so I'm going to see if we can dig a little bit deeper. You mentioned things like Jazz Jackrabbit and Jill of the Jungle as being influences from when you were younger. In what ways, like how did the soundtracks from these games influence you in your composing career now? Yeah,
so Jazz Jackrabbit, the first one, as well as the second Jazz Jackrabbit game. The second one is actually composed by Alexander Brandon, who is still active, and he also one of the composers of Unreal and Deus Ex. So he has that super kind of like recognizable 80s lead style, kind of like Vangelis, or I don't know. It's something that I can just recognize instantly. It's like a very demo scene inspired sound. So that's been a big influence on me, as well as the original Jazz Jackrabbit, which is sort of, as I said, like the 90s New Jack Swing sound. And it's all. I haven't really even got a chance to touch on some of my other influences. Are stuff that's not from my childhood, like Chrono Trigger and Sonic. I didn't really get to play until I was a teenager with emulators and stuff. But those are a huge influence on my tracks. And even things that are coming out now, like the Persona series, and even like Nier Automata, is something that I think about when writing pretty much every soundtrack. I think like I could use an idea from that. It's just like, I mean, there's so much good stuff coming out now as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's fair. I hadn't even thought about Persona in a while, but the Persona soundtracks are really hard hitting. That's really cool.
Yeah, you always forget that we're so busy, I think, as retro gamers, trying to look back into the past to kind of dive deep, especially with video game collecting, and be like, what games have I not played that have like, great gameplay, fantastic soundtracks, etc. That you kind of forget that there's so many new games and new soundtracks coming out, and at least in terms of a collecting purpose, that's one of the nice things about the previous generations. The games are so cheap. Like right now I'm collecting games, like I'm going through the Xbox 360 and the Wii library and that kind of generation, and kind of picking and choosing games that have like great soundtracks and great gameplay and everything, and you kind of like uncover a bit of the past even though it's not that far off. So it definitely kind of makes you think about your games that you missed and that you're currently playing along with the games that are out now that you're kind of missing out on. So I think it's important to touch on that, and you kind of did in that statement. So
I kind of think like it probably doesn't take that many years for you to be able to tell that the soundtrack to this game is a classic. Like Phoenix Wright, it doesn't feel that long ago to me, but maybe I'm just old. But
same here.
But that's a classic soundtrack, and the main theme, the Turnabout Sisters, is like I'll instantly think about that if I'm writing for, like I said, a dating sim or a visual novel kind of situation. That's what pops into my head immediately.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense.
All right, so Justin, your last track of the podcast for Coda's awesome music. What do you got for us?
So we are going to close out with an Omega Strike track. Appropriately, it is called Omega Citadel. Again, Omega Strike came out in 2017 on Steam, just recently this year in 2018 on PS4, and will be soon coming out on the Xbox One. And of course, this was composed by our guest, Coda.
right, you've returned to XVGM Radio. That was Omega Strike. That was Justin's final pick of the episode, and that was Omega Citadel. Omega Strike came out in 2017, and recently in 2018 it came out on PlayStation 4, soon to be coming out on Xbox One. And no Switch port, I guess, at this point, but who knows? Maybe we'll see one.
It's becoming a more popular system. As time goes on. So
absolutely.
What'd you think of the track?
Oh, it was great. I was really liking this one. I like how initially it kind of has a more serious kind of like boss vibe, but then it turns into this like 80s action romp movie.
That's
like,
exactly where my mind went.
Yeah. I'm just picturing like Arnold Schwarzenegger and like Sylvester Stallone like wrestling in the woods together or something like that, like naked, covered in like sandwich meat or something like that, you know?
Almost like a training montage.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that's minus the specifics of your scene. That's pretty.
What? That's no good.
That's not where my mind went. No, I was thinking more like a Ralph Macchio type
covered in sandwich meat. No. Like roast beef.
No, like just cheese. Just
cheese.
Okay. No, but I definitely got that. Like as soon as I got into the main melody, the da 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 da, and all I could think of was like 80s. I don't know if it was really like 80s montage, but it definitely felt like a lot of the movies from the 80s that I really enjoyed.
Yeah,
action movies.
And still with those synth hits too.
Yes.
Like
the
so prominent.
But it also felt sort of almost kind of harkening back to the intro track. There were a couple different like parts of the song, like it flowed or transitioned from like this one theme into another theme, and then even came back, which was really good. Like I liked the difference between like this main melody here, and then we're gonna go into this other melody for a little bit, and then come back and just kind of bounce between these different sort of themes.
It certainly kept me guessing throughout the entire track, which it's always what you want to have. Is you want a track that's less predictable and is more keeps you interested throughout the entire experience, because otherwise you have a very short, repetitive song.
You want something engaging.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, this was the final area of the game, so like I was saying before, it's like this is my chance to go all out, and the main theme of the song is that sort of 80s montage, Kenny Loggins' Danger Zone style.
Yes.
And then the linking segments between those main sections are where I incorporate like the Omega Strike theme that was originally from the Resistance Caverns. I have Dr. Omega's theme in there at some points, and so those callbacks sort of become the the interludes between the main unique theme for Omega Citadel.
Now all I can picture is Tom Cruise in a jet fighter. And the entire thing is completely covered in sandwich meat. Like,
you're gonna say the cockpit was just filled with sandwich meat.
Balls to the wall cockpit full of sandwich meat.
Good lord.
Yeah. There's too much of roast beef everywhere.
But no,
I guess I'm just hungry. I don't know.
I mean, that's possible too.
Yeah.
It's way post lunch.
Yes.
But you mentioned the main theme comes in there, and like the theme from the Caverns. And there's been so many other things that we've listened to between what Mike picked in the beginning and this one here that I've sort of forgotten. But as you said, I'm like, oh yeah, I picked up on it when I was listening to it because I had heard it earlier. I was like, this sounds really familiar. This sounds really cool.
Yeah.
Very, very, very nice.
Yeah. It's good stuff.
Yeah.
Cool.
So as we start to wrap things up for today's episode, I know that these kind of questions are sometimes difficult to get to because sometimes you can't talk about upcoming projects, but are there any upcoming projects that you're working on that you can talk about?
I'm pretty sure I can talk about them.
Nice.
Fingers crossed.
So I'll just go for it.
Talk about it until it's like really close to release or something.
Yeah, non-disclosure, right?
Yeah, the NDA stuff.
So I'm working on a game called Horizon Vanguard, which the demo is out on Steam already. So you can play the demo. It has a few of my tracks in it. It's a first-person Virtua Cop style shoot 'em up.
Nice.
It's has VR support. It's actually designed with VR in mind, but you can play it without. And yeah, it's got a sort of Virtua Cop early 3D aesthetic, which is really cool. And I'm also working on a game called Steel Assault, and that is a sort of like SNES / Genesis Contra Turrican style run and gun platformer.
And that's Steel Assault like to steal some deli meats, or to steal as in like
steal the material steal?
These these deli meats.
Yeah.
These deli meats were so hard to bite into. It felt like I was eating steel.
Oh my god.
Yeah, the latter.
Okay.
Oh my god.
All right, good.
Very cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, we want to thank Coda first and foremost for being on the show. Thank you so much for stopping by and showcasing these awesome tracks, and we have a bunch of money to spend on these games and these soundtracks. So
Sure thing.
yeah, well done. Where can we find you on the web?
The best place is my Bandcamp. It's bc.s3m.us, which I'm sure you'll need a link to.
Yep, yeah, we will definitely post links in the show notes. So if you are listening and you want to go, you'll be able to find all the links that we're going to be talking about today in that.
And from my Bandcamp, you can get to my Spotify, my Twitter, my SoundCloud, all that good stuff.
Perfect.
Nice,
Awesome.
nice.
Cool. We also want to thank Scarlet Moon Productions again. They helped provide us the ability to reach out and discuss with Coda for a potential interview. So ScarletMoonProductions.com is their website, and they have a ton of great artists and chiptune or classic composers, tons of really good stuff. They have their own Bandcamp as well, and that's scarletmoonrecords.bandcamp.com. So definitely check them out as well. Yeah, let's talk about our final decisions for tracks. At the end of every episode, we pick our favorite tracks that we listen to, and this is especially going to be difficult because we loved each and every one of these tracks. So, Justin, I'll let you go first. What was your absolute favorite pick of all these?
I think I'm going to go with a track that I picked to play, and that will be Dangerous Enemy.
Okay.
That one, I said it kicked me in the pants. I'm still feeling it. That one was a lot of fun.
Yeah. That was the Grave Danger track, right?
Correct. Off of Grave Danger, sorry.
Yes. Oh, man. This is tough. I'm going to say it's down between the first three tracks that I picked. Mm-hmm. So Grave Dangers, Last Stop, Stage 1A, Omega Strike, Resistance, Caverns, and VideoBall Jam. I'm going to go with VideoBall Jam.
Yeah.
That's
a smart pick.
Such a funky, fresh track. I was really feeling that. So
it's a close second for me, I'll say.
Yeah,
that was a fun pick.
Definitely.
Do I get a pick?
Yes, you do. Go for it.
If you had a favorite song from today.
All right. My pick is going to be Omega Citadel, which I'm glad neither of you guys picked.
Okay.
But yeah, that's it's got everything I like in it. The 80s montage style, and incorporating shamelessly a bunch of elements from every other track.
Yes. Awesome.
Nice.
Very cool.
Good picks.
All right. Well, again, thank you to Coda for joining us. If you want to find us, you could find us at XVGMRadio.com. And that is our main website where you could find out information about us for Justin and Mike. And then, of course, listen to every single episode for our podcast. You could also check us out on iTunes. Give us a rating, give us a like, give us a listen, and let us know what you think of the podcast. Ratings and reviews really help get notoriety for our show, so we really would appreciate that. You could also check us out at youtube.com/dongled. That is the YouTube page for this show. It's also my show for things like Dude, You Haven't Played This Game and all the other stuff that I do on my channel. So where else can you find us?
So you can also find us on the social media websites of today. Facebook.com/groups/XVGM Radio is our Facebook group where you can connect with other like-minded VGM fans and discuss the episode or whatever the topic of the day is, whether we're voting on favorite fighting games or just talking about different pieces of VGM that somebody has found and shared with us.
Yeah, share your favorite tracks, and of course we want to know what your favorite tracks were for this incredible episode, so let us know in the comments.
We are also on Twitter and Instagram. We are at XVGM Radio.
Yes.
If you want to email us for any reason, you can email us at xvgmradio@gmail.com. And that about does it for us.
That does. So what do we got next coming up for episode 6?
So episode 6 is going to be a fun little blast from the past. We're going to be covering some of our favorite PS1 title tracks.
Yes. Tons of retro goodness there. All kinds of various PlayStation tracks, Redbook audio, and so on and so forth. So some really exciting stuff. So yeah, I think everybody will really enjoy that one.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Nice.
So
I'm going to recommend Brave Fencer Musashi.
Yes.
Oh, that's a good game.
That is a good game with a great soundtrack. Absolutely. So you'll just have to tune in next episode and find out if we picked that track or other tracks or what we picked.
Coming out in 2 weeks.
Yes. So signing off from XVGM Radio. Again, thank you so much for Coda for joining us on this episode. This is Mike.
And Justin.
Signing off.